check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Today we are going to be discussing the most likely players to break out in the 2020 NFL season. Now let's start with the Arizona Cardinals' biggest breakout player, and that's Kyler Murray. Now, in the NFL draft, the Arizona Cardinals opted to draft Josh Jones in the 3rd round, and this is a player that I believe was a huge steal for them. But even furthermore, they traded for DeAndre Hopkins this offseason, and Kyler Murray was already dominating as a rookie anyways. Kyler Murray won Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2019 and was able to pass for 3,000 yards and run for 500 yards as a rookie. And this is with an absolutely depleted offensive line and his best wide receiver being an aging Larry Fitzgerald. There is no doubt in my mind that Kyler Murray is probably the most likely player to have a breakout this season. I believe the Atlanta Falcons' biggest breakout player is Calvin Ridley. And to say wide receiver Calvin Ridley is a breakout star when he's already put together like 2 quality seasons in the league is a bit of a stretch, but 2020 could be the year that he finally becomes a Pro Bowl caliber player. So look for Calvin Ridley to completely crush it this year, because bear in mind that this is also Matt Ryan's 2nd year in Dirk Koetter's offense, and the added familiarity may serve Calvin Ridley very well, because Matt Ryan won NFL MVP in 2016 when it was his 2nd year in offensive coordinator Kyle Shanahan's offense. Speaking of wide receivers, let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens' most likely breakout player, and that's Marquise Hollywood Brown. Last year, Antonio Brown's cousin would catch 46 passes for 584 yards and 7 touchdowns. But I have a feeling that we are going to see an incredible season from Marquise Brown, because Lamar Jackson will have another year in Greg Roman's offense, and Marquise Brown should be in better shape coming into the season. For the Buffalo Bills, I was originally going to say that Devin Singletary seemed primed for a breakout this season, but the Buffalo Bills would absolutely love to see last year's 1st round pick break out for them. In his rookie season, Ed Oliver finished with 43 tackles, 5 sacks, and 2 passes defended, which is remarkable for an interior defensive lineman. The Bills are hoping that Ed Oliver becomes their best defensive tackle since Marcel Darius, but that's not nearly as critical as the Carolina Panthers' potential breakout star, and that's Teddy Bridgewater. Well, Teddy, this is it. The entire world will be looking at you to complete one of the greatest comeback stories in NFL history. We're talking about a player that was supposed to be a top 5 NFL draft pick who got drafted with the final pick in the 1st round of the 2014 NFL draft, who made it to the Pro Bowl in his 2nd season as the Vikings franchise QB, only to sustain a freak ACL injury that kept him out of football until the 2017 NFL season. As a result, the Vikings declined his player option, and Teddy Bridgewater was a journeyman for the last 3 years, jumping from the Jets to the Saints in an attempt to prove himself before signing a 3-year contract with the division rival Carolina Panthers. I hope this is the year that he proves that he belongs, because it would make for one hell of a story. And for the Chicago Bears, their biggest breakout player would have to be David Montgomery. Last year, we all had incredibly high hopes for David Montgomery, a player that the entire Bears offense was raving about. Montgomery had a pedestrian rookie season, rushing for 889 yards, 6 touchdowns on 3.7 yards per carry. He had 185 yards on 25 receptions as well, but the Bears were expecting a little bit more out of him. For the Cincinnati Bengals, their biggest breakout player was extremely tough, because the Bengals have a ton of new youth coming in, but no player will be more vital to their success than last year's 1st round draft pick Jonah Williams. Last year, in my opinion, it wasn't the injury of AJ Green that caused the Bengals to completely punt on the season. In my opinion, it was Jonah Williams. The Bengals already had a reputation of having a terrible offensive line last year and spent their 11th overall pick trying to fix that. Unfortunately, Williams tore his labrum during OTAs, and he was out for the entire season. If Jonah Williams is able to dominate this season, it could speed up the Bengals rebuild tremendously, but if he flops, then it may set the Cincinnati Bengals back a few years and could potentially damage their brand new franchise QB, Joe Burrow. Speaking of quarterbacks, let's talk about the Cleveland Browns quarterback, Baker Mayfield, because he, in my opinion, is the biggest breakout prospect for the Browns. As a matter of fact, he has to break out. I always make this joke about Baker, where if you create a narrative about him that counts him out or doubts him, he will respond with incredible play on the field. He is the ultimate underdog, but once he is no longer the underdog, he night begins to slip. Well, Baker, you seem like an underdog once again. Baker has to break out this year. If he puts up a season that makes him look like the NFL's next great turnover machine, it could result in his option not being picked up next offseason. Baker has to break out this season, otherwise he will be joining a long list of former Browns quarterbacks. For the Dallas Cowboys, I have Trevon Diggs breaking out, and originally I was going to say CeeDee Lamb over here, but I believe Trevon Diggs will have more of an opportunity to prove himself than his fellow rookie classmate. The reason being that CeeDee Lamb will be behind two receivers who had 1,000-yard receiving seasons last year. There's only so much football to go around, and if CeeDee doesn't break out, it was probably due to a lack of opportunity. Trevon Diggs, however, is filling really big shoes as Byron Jones just left the Dallas Cowboys to sign with the Miami Dolphins. Diggs is also a rookie, so he may be tested more consistently in his career. For the Denver Broncos, I have Drew Lock over here, and I think this is the easiest pick because after years of the Broncos trying to find their franchise QB, they found this badass rap god named Drew Lock. Like, look at him rapping over here. Jokes aside, Drew Lock had a remarkable season when he only had Noah Fant and Cortland Sutton as his go-to targets. Drew Lock now has a decent offensive line with one of the deepest backfields in the league that feature Melvin Gordon, Phillip Lindsay, and Royce Freeman. The Broncos also drafted my absolute favorite wide receiver in this class in Jerry Jeudy, and got Lock another wide receiver in KJ Hamler. Lock seems the most likely to break out this season. For the Detroit Lions, I have Jeffrey Okudah, who's most primed to break out this season because he's in a very similar scenario as Trevon Diggs. He's coming in to replace the departed Darius Slay, and if he is successful, the Lions could theoretically finish with the same record as last year, but I believe he has the potential to be a massive upgrade over Darius Slay. For the Green Bay Packers, their biggest breakout prospect has to be Allen Lazard, because when the Packers opted to draft Jordan Love in the first round, they were essentially doubling down on Allen Lazard, who looked like the team's future wide receiver too. Lazard's extremely versatile and can be plugged into any wide receiver slot. He also has the trust of Aaron Rodgers. Speaking of wide receivers, my biggest breakout prospect for the Houston Texans happens to be a wide receiver, and no, it's not Brandon Cooks, it's Will Fuller. In case you happen to miss it, the Texans happen to trade DeAndre Hopkins, but this means Will Fuller is officially the wide receiver with the most familiarity in the Texans offense. If he can stay healthy and demonstrate more of that big player ability, then he will have a Pro Bowl season. But that's a huge if. Brandon Cooks isn't going to come in and dominate on a Texans offense that will be having a very strange offseason due to the current pandemic, which means it's up to Will Fuller to carry the load for the Texans this season. Now, I understand we're getting on a spree of wide receivers, but let's include another one for the Indianapolis Colts, and that's Michael Pittman Jr. This one, Michael Pittman, despite me going to UCLA and UCLA being my alma mater, this was one of my favorite picks from the draft, because I believe in any other draft, Pittman would have easily been a top 20 pick. But since this year's wide receiver class was so deep, Pittman was available on day 2. Now, Pittman's success is directly tied to which version of Phillip Rivers we will see. If we see the version of Rivers that we saw last year, the one throwing into double coverage for no apparent reason, then Pittman will likely not succeed. If we see an angry and motivated Rivers come in and capitalize on potentially his final opportunity to win a Super Bowl with an offensive genius as his head coach and one of the league's best defenses, then Pittman could be in for a Pro Bowl season. Ending our streak of wide receivers is the Jacksonville Jaguars' biggest breakout prospect, and that's Gardner Minshew. Like Baker Mayfield, Minshew has to win it or else his NFL career will essentially be over. If Gardner Minshew makes the most of his opportunity and is able to somehow win at least 8 games, which I believe he is more than capable of doing, then the Jacksonville Jaguars won't really be in a position to draft Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence. For the Kansas City Chiefs, on a roster of many players that have already broken out, I am choosing Clyde Edwards-Helaire as their biggest breakout prospect. Clyde's skill set is made for what the Kansas City Chiefs do, and the Chiefs didn't spend a first-round pick on Clyde just so he could sit on the sidelines and watch Damian Williams. For the Las Vegas Raiders, I have their biggest breakout prospect being Hunter Renfrow, who received the most targets in the 2019 NFL season and had over 100 yards receiving and a touchdown in his final 2 games. The familiarity with Derek Carr is there, and given the pandemic affecting off-season training, that familiarity should pay off huge for Renfrow coming in, and that's despite the Raiders drafting Henry Ruggs. For the Los Angeles Chargers, my biggest breakout prospect is Mike Williams, and boy have I been waiting for Mike Williams to begin dominating defenses for the longest time now. Last year he was able to barely make it past the 1,000-yard receiving mark, but I believe Mike Williams has the potential to be a top 3 wide receiver in the entire NFL. He's just 25 and he's going into his 4th NFL season. Now, Tyrod Taylor isn't really known for attempting to air out the football to big NFL wide receivers, but maybe a little Justin Herbert magic could get Mike Williams to the next step and get him his first Pro Bowl. For the Los Angeles Rams, my biggest breakout prospect for them is Cam Akers because it's fairly simple. The Rams moved on from Todd Gurley and need a brand new workhorse halfback. Cam Akers said himself that he thinks he can be a 3 to 4 down back if necessary. Now, for all you know, Malcolm Brown could outperform Cam Akers, but assuming he doesn't, I believe Cam Akers could dominate for the Rams. For the Miami Dolphins, I have their biggest breakout prospect being Tua Tagovailoa, and this was a year in the making. Tua joins a fresh Miami Dolphins roster that boasts Matt Breida, Shaq Lawson, and Byron Jones, among several other offseason additions. The Dolphins could sneak into the playoffs this year now that Tom Brady left the Patriots, or they can have another underperforming season. For the Minnesota Vikings, my biggest breakout prospect for them is their cornerback Mike Hughes, and that's because they lost 3 of their best cornerbacks this past offseason. Yeah, they added Jeff Gladney in the first round, but it does take some time for corners to acclimate to the NFL. So the Vikings really need Mike Hughes to break out if they want the defense to remain at least passable. For the New England Patriots, does anyone want to take a guess as to who the New England Patriots' most likely breakout prospect is? Let's give them like 4 seconds. Comment down below. And if you chose Jarrett Stidham, then congratulations, you and I think alike, because this scenario is kind of similar to the Baker Mayfield scenario, because either Jarrett performs so well that the Patriots can't possibly be in a position to draft Trevor Lawrence, or the Patriots perform so poorly that they are in a position to take a brand new quarterback in next year's draft. For the New Orleans Saints, my biggest breakout player for them is Marcus Davenport, and man, do the Saints want Davenport to be a star. After investing an additional first-round pick to trade up for him, the Saints are hoping that Davenport could terrorize on the opposite edge of Cam Jordan. The signs are there. In his final 3 games for the Saints last year, he attained 3 sacks and 8 tackles. If Davenport is successful, the Saints have a great chance of making it back to the Super Bowl. For the New York Giants, I have Daniel Jones as their biggest breakout prospect, because do they have a superstar halfback? You betcha. Improved offensive line? Check. Brand new culture-changing head coach? Check. All the ingredients are there for Daniel Jones to build upon the potential he displayed in his rookie season. For the New York Jets, I also happen to have a quarterback as their biggest breakout prospect in Sam Darnold. And this is honestly Baker Mayfield, but in reverse, because Mayfield had an awesome rookie year and a disappointing sophomore year, whereas Darnold seems to be slowly improving. He did have that embarrassing outing against the Patriots where he threw 4 interceptions on national television and the camera caught him saying he's seeing ghosts.
Ghosts.
And the Jets finished last season by winning 6 of their last 8 games. So if Darnold learns to take care of the football, then he might be the most successful quarterback in NFL history to be drafted out of USC since Carson Palmer. For the Philadelphia Eagles, I have their biggest breakout star being Jalen Reagor. Now, I understand Eagles fans think that Reagor is Nelson Aguilar 2.0, and I understand that that was my player comparison for him. But no 2 players are made alike, and I'm sure Reagor is very wary of those comparisons. If he studies Aguilar to make sure he is not the next version of him, he can give the Eagles the deep threat that they've been yearning for since Doug Peterson has been hired. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, my biggest breakout prospect for them is Devin Bush. Devin Bush showed tremendous potential in his rookie season. Although he had the occasional mental lapse, he did struggle in coverage at times, but he was able to chase down ball carriers from behind the line of scrimmage. If he builds upon this, he can be the anchor of the Steelers defense. For the 49ers, I also have another defensive prospect in Javon Kinlaw. Now, the 49ers aren't exactly desperate for players to break out, but if they could choose one, I believe it would be their highest defensive draft pick in this year's draft. For the Seattle Seahawks, I have Rashad Penny as their biggest breakout prospect, because I hope this is the year that Rashad Penny finally capitalizes upon his big play potential. He was a former first-round pick, but gets used almost secondarily to Chris Carson. I believe it's only a matter of time before the reins get handed from Chris Carson to Rashad Penny. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, my biggest breakout prospect for them is Antoine Winfield Jr., because it's just like destiny, isn't it? The son of of an all-pro Antoine Winfield is finally ready to take the field for this year's most uniquely assembled team. With Rob Gronkowski and Tom Brady heading to Tampa Bay and handling the offense, it should be exciting to see Winfield's big play potential on defense. For the Tennessee Titans, I have Jeffrey Simmons as their biggest breakout player because he was picked 19th by the Tennessee Titans after tearing his ACL during a pre-draft workout. The rehab from his knee injury kept Simmons out until October, but he played at a high level as soon as he hit the field despite missing an entire offseason. And my final biggest breakout player for the Washington Redskins is Dwayne Haskins. Maybe the fact that he finally has a head coach that doesn't decide to completely ruin his development by throwing him in a game against the New York Giants when he clearly wasn't ready. Maybe now he'll have a decent season. I'm a huge believer in Ron Rivera as a coach, and I feel like he will put Haskins in the best situation to succeed as a player, at least more than Jay Gruden. Let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with. Make sure you like this video and subscribe if you enjoy the content. I'm your boy Mikerophone, and I'll catch you guys in our next upload.